I have presided over murder trials, fraud cases, bitter family disputes, and lawsuits involving millions of dollars. But there was one case that left an entire courtroom staring at their phones in complete disbelief, not because of the evidence, not because of the verdict, because a woman named Karen Blake turned a courtroom into a social media performance. And by the time the hearing ended, the very audience she brought to support her became the reason everything collapsed. She walked into court with confidence. She walked out having lost far more than the lawsuit. Believe me, when I realized what she had been doing, even I was surprised. Before we go any further, make sure you have subscribed to this channel for more powerful courtroom stories like this one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Also, comment below and tell us where you are watching this video from. Now let me take you back to where this case truly began. The plaintiff was a man named Ethan Parker, 39 years old, owner of a small family-run bakery in Arizona, soft-spoken, respectful. The kind of person who looked uncomfortable simply being inside a courtroom. Across from him sat Karen Blake. 32 years old, over 1 million TikTok followers, Donster clothes, perfect makeup on in hand until the last possible second, and an expression that suggested she believed the entire hearing was beneath her. Years on the bench teach you something important. Some people enter a courtroom seeking justice. Others enter seeking attention. Karen immediately struck me as the second type. The dispute began 6 months earlier. According to Ethan, Karen had posted a viral video accusing his bakery of food contamination, customer mistreatment, and unsafe kitchen conditions. The video exploded online, millions of views, hundreds of thousands of comments, thousands of negative reviews. Interesting, very interesting, because according to health inspection records, none of Karen's allegations were true. Not one. Ethan claimed the viral accusations nearly destroyed his business. Customers disappeared, employees quit, orders were canceled. Revenue dropped by more than 60%. Now he was suing. The courtroom remained quiet as Ethan described what happened. Then Karen laughed. Actually laughed. That caught my attention immediately. Years on the bench teach you to pay close attention when someone laughs during serious testimony. Sometimes it reveals confidence. Sometimes it reveals contempt. Karen's laughter felt like contempt. I looked toward her. "Do you find something amusing, Miss Blake?" She shrugged. "He's exaggerating." Interesting, very interesting, because she had not challenged the facts, only the consequences. That distinction mattered a lot. I asked Ethan if he had evidence connecting the losses to Karen's video. He handed over financial records, customer emails, review histories, advertising reports. Everything appeared organized, very organized. Then I turned toward Karen. "Did you publish the video?" "Yes," no hesitation. "Interesting, very interesting." "Did you accuse the bakery of unsanitary conditions?" "Yes." "Did you personally witness unsanitary conditions?" A pause. The first pause of the day. That immediately caught my attention. Years on the bench teach you that hesitation often arrives when truth and strategy begin fighting each other. Karen finally answered. "I heard about them." Interesting answer. Not "I saw them," not "I documented them," not "I reported them." I heard about them. That distinction mattered a lot. Then I reviewed the inspection reports. Every inspection passed, every health review passed. Every official record contradicted her claims. The spectators exchanged glances. Karen seemed unconcerned, very unconcerned, almost too unconcerned. Then I noticed something unusual. Several people seated in the public gallery were watching Karen instead of the hearing. Interesting, very interesting. Whenever Karen spoke, they smiled. Whenever Ethan spoke, they rolled their eyes. Years on the bench teach you to observe everyone in the room, not just the parties. I continued reviewing documents. Then Ethan submitted something unexpected, a series of screenshots. TikTok screenshots, dozens of them. The moment I saw Karen's expression, I knew they mattered a lot. I reviewed the first screenshot, then the second, then the third. And suddenly I understood why Karen seemed so relaxed, because this lawsuit wasn't just a lawsuit to her. It was content, interesting, very interesting. One post read, "Court date tomorrow." Let's show this bakery owner what happens when he messes with the wrong creator. The room became silent. I continued reading. Another post, "Who wants front row seats?" Then another, "Let's pack the courtroom." Interesting, very interesting. I slowly looked toward the gallery, and for the first time all day, several spectators suddenly looked very uncomfortable. Because they weren't random spectators. They were Karen's followers. Karen had invited them, encouraged them, promoted the hearing online. And judging by the screenshots, she intended to turn the case into a viral event. That observation bothered me a lot. Courtrooms are places for evidence, not performances. Then I found one final screenshot. And honestly, the moment I read it, I knew this case was about to become much bigger than a defamation lawsuit. Much bigger. I read it once, then twice, then a third time, because I wanted to be absolutely certain. I slowly looked up. Karen saw my expression, and for the first time that morning, her confidence cracked because the post appeared to show something she never expected the court to see. Something that could destroy not only her defense, but her entire online career. The moment I finished reading that final screenshot, I stopped listening to the arguments, not permanently. Just long enough to focus on what was sitting in front of me. Because years on the bench teach you that people often reveal the truth when they believe they are speaking to supporters instead of investigators. And Karen Blake clearly believed she was speaking to supporters. The courtroom remained silent. Ethan Parker sat quietly. The spectators in the gallery suddenly looked much less confident. Karen stared at the table. Interesting, very interesting. Because only a few minutes earlier, she seemed completely comfortable. Now she looked worried, very worried. That change caught my attention immediately. I reviewed the screenshot again, then a third time, because the wording mattered a lot. The post had been uploaded less than 24 hours before the hearing, and according to Karen's own account, it read, "Don't worry. I already know exactly how this case ends." Interesting. Very interesting. Not necessarily inappropriate, at least not by itself. The problem was what came next. I continued reading. "Once this hearing is over, I'll have enough content for 6 months." The room became silent. Domville silence, because suddenly the lawsuit looked different. Not to Ethan, to Karen. The hearing wasn't a legal proceeding. It was material. A storyline. A source of engagement. Years on the bench teach you that motive matters. And Karen's motive was becoming clearer by the minute. Then I found another post. Interesting, very interesting. This one was uploaded only a few hours later. The caption read, "Imagine thinking facts matter more than followers." The spectators immediately became uncomfortable. Several lowered their heads. Karen looked away. That reaction mattered a lot because people usually look away when they already know the evidence is bad, very bad. I looked toward Karen. "Did you post this?" A pause. Then, yes, interesting, very interesting, because now we had confirmation, not speculation, not screenshots from unknown sources, confirmation. Her own words, her own account, her own audience. Then I asked a simple question. "What did you mean by that?" The room became quiet. Karen shifted in her chair. Years on the bench teach you that people often become uncomfortable when forced to explain statements they originally believed would never face scrutiny. Karen looked uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. Finally, she answered, "It was a joke." Interesting answer, very interesting answer, because jokes often become explanations after evidence appears. That pattern is remarkably common. I continued reviewing the social media records. Then I found something much more troubling. A live stream, interesting, very interesting. The moment I saw the title, I knew we were moving into dangerous territory. The live stream occurred 3 weeks before the hearing. More than 60,000 viewers watched it. Interesting, very interesting. I reviewed the transcript, then another section, then another. And suddenly I understood why Ethan's business suffered so severely. Karen wasn't merely discussing the bakery, she was targeting it, repeatedly. The room became silent. I read one portion aloud. "If enough people leave reviews, business is listening." Interesting, very interesting. Because according to the records, thousands of negative reviews appeared within 48 hours of that statement, many from people who never visited the bakery, many from people living hundreds or even thousands of miles away. The spectators exchanged looks. Karen remained silent. That observation fascinated me, because earlier she interrupted constantly. Now she seemed reluctant to speak at all. Then I found another section of the live stream. And honestly, this is where the case began changing dramatically. I read it once, then twice, then a third time, because I wanted to be absolutely certain. The transcript stated, "Let's see if we can get them shut down." The room froze. Domicile silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even Karen appeared stunned, hearing her own words read back to her. Interesting, very interesting, because those words suggested something much larger than criticism. They suggested intent. That distinction mattered a lot. Then I reviewed additional evidence. Website traffic reports, review timelines, advertising analytics, everything appeared consistent. The negative campaign began almost immediately after Karen's content. The numbers were extraordinary. And honestly, disturbing. Years on the bench teach you that influence carries responsibility. The larger the audience, the greater that responsibility becomes. Karen appeared to view influence differently. As leverage, then I noticed something else, a pattern inside the comments. Interesting. Very interesting. Many followers referenced specific instructions, specific phrases, specific actions. I reviewed the records carefully. Then another detail caught my attention. Multiple comments mentioned a private group, a group Karen apparently operated. That immediately interested me, because public content tells one story. Private content often tells another. I looked toward Ethan. "Do we have records from this group?" He nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." Interesting, very interesting. Karen immediately looked terrified, actually terrified. That reaction alone told me those records mattered. A lot, years on the bench, teach you that people often reveal the importance of evidence before anyone else sees it. Karen had just done exactly that. Then Ethan handed over another folder, a very thick folder. I reviewed the first page, then the second, then the third. And honestly, the deeper I looked, the more concerned I became. Because according to the records, Karen wasn't simply discussing the lawsuit inside the group. She was organizing something coordinated, something deliberate, something that went far beyond ordinary social media activity. I slowly looked up. Karen was staring directly at me, terrified, because she already knew what I was reading. And she knew exactly what was coming next. The moment I opened the records from Karen Blake's private group, the atmosphere inside the courtroom changed completely, not gradually, immediately. Because public posts are one thing, private coordination is something else entirely. Years on the bench teach you that people often behave differently when they believe outsiders cannot see them. The courtroom remained silent. Karen stared at the table. Ethan Parker sat quietly. The spectators in the gallery looked increasingly uncomfortable, and honestly, several appeared worried. Very worried. That observation caught my attention because people rarely look worried unless they already know what the evidence contains. I reviewed the first page, then another, then another. The private group contained thousands of members. Interesting, very interesting. Karen wasn't merely posting content. She was leading conversations, directing conversations, shaping conversations. That distinction mattered a lot. Then I found a message posted 10 days before Ethan filed the lawsuit. I read it once, then twice, then a third time. Because the wording immediately caught my attention. The message read, "Keep pressure on them. Don't let up." The room became silent. Tom Salot's silence. I continued reading. Every review matters. Interesting, very interesting. Because according to Ethan's records, hundreds of new negative reviews appeared shortly afterward. The timing wasn't subtle, not even close. I looked toward Karen. "Did you write this?" A pause, then, "Yes." Interesting, very interesting, because now we had confirmation, not speculation, not assumptions, confirmation. I asked another question. "What pressure were you referring to?" Karen shifted in her chair. Years on the bench teach you that body language often changes before answers do. Karen's body language was screaming discomfort. Finally, she answered, "Public accountability." Interesting answer, very interesting, because public accountability usually involves facts. The problem was that many of her claims appeared unsupported. That distinction mattered a lot. Then I reviewed another message. This one disturbed me a lot because it wasn't merely discussing the bakery. It was discussing employees, specific employees, named employees. Interesting, very interesting. I read part of the message aloud. "People should know who works there." The room froze. Several spectators looked down immediately. Karen looked away. Interesting, very interesting. Because reactions like that often reveal awareness. Awareness that a line may have been crossed. Years on the bench teach you that criticism of a business is one thing. Targeting individual employees is something very different. Then I found another post. And honestly, this one changed everything. I read it once, then twice, then a third time, because I wanted to be absolutely certain. The message read, "Let's make this impossible for them to ignore." Interesting, very interesting. The problem wasn't the sentence itself. It was what followed. Karen attached a list, a detailed list. Review sites, complaint portals, business directories, social media pages, everything. The room became silent because now the conduct appeared coordinated, deliberately coordinated. I looked toward Ethan. The man simply nodded, not triumphantly, not dramatically, just quietly, as if he had spent months waiting for someone to finally see what happened. That observation stayed with me. Then I continued reviewing the records, and that's when I found something extraordinary. A poll, interesting, very interesting. Karen created a poll inside the group. The question was simple. How hard should we push? The room froze. I reviewed the response options, then another time, because I could hardly believe what I was seeing. The options included: keep posting, contact sponsors, leave reviews, contacts local media. Interesting, very interesting, because this wasn't spontaneous outrage. It looked organized, very organized. Karen immediately interrupted for the first time in quite a while. It was community engagement. Interesting answer. Very interesting answer, because people often rename conduct when the original description becomes uncomfortable. That pattern appears surprisingly often. I asked a simple question. Did most group members ever visit the bakery? Silence, silence. Then, no. Interesting. Very interesting. The spectators exchanged looks because now another important fact emerged. Many participants had no direct experience with the business they were attacking. That mattered a lot. Then I reviewed another document, a spreadsheet. Interesting, very interesting. The moment I saw Karen's reaction, I knew it was important, extremely important. Years on the bench teach you that people often reveal the value of evidence before anyone else understands it. Karen looked terrified, actually terrified. I reviewed the spreadsheet carefully, then another page, then another. And slowly I realized what I was looking at. The document tracked engagement, not bakery conditions, not customer complaints. Engagement, views, shares, comments, follower growth. Interesting, very interesting, because according to the records, every major accusation against Ethan's Bakery produced dramatic increases in Karen's audience. The room became silent. I reviewed the totals again, then a third time, because the numbers were extraordinary. Hundreds of thousands of new followers, millions of views, major sponsorship inquiries, advertising opportunities, everything. Interesting, very interesting. Then I found a note attached to one of the entries, and honestly, the moment I read it, I knew this case was about to explode, because according to Karen's own records, the bakery controversy wasn't simply helping her account. It had been planned as a growth strategy from the beginning. The moment I realized the bakery controversy may have been planned as a growth strategy, the entire courtroom changed. Not because social media creators are forbidden from growing their audience. They aren't. But because if a person knowingly builds growth through false accusations, the situation becomes very different. Very different. The courtroom remained silent. Karen Blake stared at the table. Ethan Parker sat motionless. The spectators watched carefully. And I was staring at records that appeared to reveal motive. Years on the bench teach you that motive often explains behavior better than any argument ever could. I reviewed the spreadsheet again, then again, because details matter a lot. One entry immediately caught my attention. Interesting, very interesting. The entry appeared beside the first viral bakery video, under a column labeled Projected Growth. The room became silent. I continued reading. Then another column appeared, Torrid Engagement, Interesting, very interesting. Then I found handwritten notes. And honestly, the moment I saw them, I knew Karen was in trouble, real trouble, because the notes weren't discussing health concerns or public safety or consumer awareness. They were discussing audience reactions, follower behavior, viewer retention, everything. I looked toward Karen. Did you create these notes? A long pause followed, then, yes. Interesting, very interesting, because once again the evidence came directly from her, not from Ethan. Not from investigators, from Karen herself. I began reading Conflict Drives Shares. The room became silent. I continued. Business owners respond emotionally. Interesting, very interesting. The spectators exchanged stunned looks. Karen remained silent, and honestly, her silence was becoming more revealing than her testimony. Then I found another note. The note that truly changed everything. I read it once, then twice, then a third time, because I wanted to be absolutely certain. The note read, "Small businesses can't afford long legal fights." The room froze. Davonsilt silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke, because suddenly the entire dispute looked different. Very different. Years on the bench teach you that when motive, opportunity, and conduct begin aligning, patterns become difficult to ignore. And the pattern here was becoming impossible to ignore. Then I reviewed additional entries. Several businesses appeared interesting. Very interesting. Not just Ethan's bakery, other businesses, other controversies, other viral campaigns. The room remained silent because now the evidence suggested Ethan wasn't the first target. That observation mattered a lot. I looked toward Karen. Have you previously created content accusing businesses of misconduct? A pause. Then, yes. Interesting. Very interesting. Have any of those businesses threatened legal action? Another pause. Then, yes. The spectators exchanged looks because now another pattern was emerging. Not one controversy. Multiple controversies. Not one dispute. Multiple disputes. That distinction mattered. Then I found another document, a private conversation. Interesting. Very interesting. The moment I saw Karen's reaction, I knew it was important. Years on the bench teach you that people often reveal the significance of evidence before anyone else sees it. Karen looked terrified. Absolutely terrified. I reviewed the messages, then another page, then another, and slowly a conversation emerged between Karen and a marketing consultant. Interesting, very interesting. Because the consultant wasn't discussing bakery safety or health concerns or public interest. The consultant was discussing engagement, growth, monetization, audience expansion, everything. I read one message aloud. Outrage content performs best. The room became silent, I continued. People engage more when they feel angry. Interesting, very interesting. Then came Karen's response. The moment I read it, I knew the case was about to reach another level because Karen wrote, I know. That's why the bakery video will work. The room froze, Daubespult silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even Karen closed her eyes because there it was, not speculation, not interpretation, her own words, her own message, her own strategy. The spectators stared. Ethan stared. And honestly, even after years on the bench, I still remember the look on Karen's face because she realized the narrative she built online was collapsing in real time. Then I found something even more disturbing, a sponsorship proposal. Interesting, very interesting. The proposal was sent shortly after the bakery video went viral. I reviewed it carefully, then again. Then a third time, because the numbers were extraordinary, major advertising opportunities, brand partnerships, merchandise projections, everything. And according to the proposal, Karen expected the bakery controversy to generate substantial income. The room became silent because now the stakes looked very different. This wasn't simply attention. This was business. Very profitable business. Then I reached the final page. And honestly, the moment I saw it, I knew the hearing was about to explode. Because attached to the sponsorship package was a draft content calendar, a detailed content calendar, one that outlined future videos, future posts, future live streams, everything. And according to the schedule, Karen planned to continue attacking Ethan's bakery for at least 6 more months, regardless of whether her allegations were true. The moment I discovered the content calendar, the entire courtroom fell silent. Not ordinary silence, the kind of silence that arrives when everyone suddenly understands what they are looking at. Because this was no longer a dispute about one video, it was no longer a disagreement about one business, it was no longer a misunderstanding. Years on the bench teach you that intent is often hidden. But when someone writes it down, intent becomes very difficult to deny. The courtroom remained still. Karen Blake sat motionless. Ethan Parker stared at the tables. The spectators watched nervously. And I was holding a document that appeared to map out months of future attacks against a business Karen claimed she was merely warning people about. Interesting, very interesting. I reviewed the calendar carefully. Then another page, then another. Because details matter a lot. The entries were remarkably specific. Week 1, bakery update video. Week 2, customer reaction video. Week 3, behind the scenes live stream. Week 4, sponsor integration. Interesting, very interesting. The pattern was obvious. The controversy itself had become content, and content had become a business model. Then I found something even more troubling. Several entries included topics that had not yet occurred. Interesting, very interesting. I read one aloud. Respond to bakery owner's denial. The room froze because, according to the timeline, Karen wrote that entry before Ethan had publicly denied anything. Interesting, very interesting. I continued reading. Expose new evidence. The spectators exchanged looks because no new evidence existed. Not yet. The calendar had been created weeks earlier. That observation mattered. A lot. Years on the bench teach you something important. When someone schedules outrage before facts exist, the outrage may not be driven by facts at all. Then I found another note, and honestly, this was the moment everything exploded. I read it once, then twice, then a third time, because I wanted to be absolutely certain. The note read, "If engagement drops, escalate." The room became silent, almost silence. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. I continued, "Use stronger accusations if needed." The spectators gasped. Karen closed her eyes. Ethan slowly lowered his head. And honestly, even after years on the bench, moments like that still disturb me, because those words suggested something terrifying, not investigation, not advocacy. Escalation, deliberate escalation. That distinction mattered a lot. Then I found the most damaging document in the entire case, a private voice message transcript. Interesting, very interesting. The moment I saw Karen's expression, I knew it was important, extremely important. I reviewed the transcript carefully, then another time, then a third time, because the wording was extraordinary. The message had been sent to a fellow content creator, someone Karen trusted, someone she apparently believed would never share it. I began reading. Honestly, I don't know if the bakery did anything wrong. The room froze. Balasat's silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The spectators looked stunned. Ethan looked stunned. Even Karen appeared stunned, hearing her own words read back to her. Interesting, very interesting, because that sentence changed everything, not legally. Factually, I continued. The story is bigger than the truth now. The room erupted into whispers. The court officer immediately called for order, again and again and again, because suddenly the entire case made sense. The videos, the live streams, the private group, the review campaigns, the sponsorship proposals, everything, the controversy had become more valuable than the facts. Then came the sentence I will never forget, the sentence that created the viral courtroom moment people would discuss for years afterward. I read it once, then twice, then a third time. Because even I could hardly believe someone would say it. Karen's voice message stated, "By the time anyone proves me wrong, I'll have doubled my followers." The room exploded, gasps, whispers, shock. Actual shock. Several spectators looked at Karen in disbelief. Others looked down, and something fascinating happened. For the first time all day, the people she brought to support her stopped looking like supporters. They looked disappointed. That observation mattered a lot, because Karen built her power around attention, and attention was beginning to disappear. Then I noticed something else, a notification report attached to the evidence package. Interesting, very interesting. I reviewed it carefully. Then another page, then another. And suddenly I realized something shocking, because while this lawsuit was unfolding, several major advertisers had already reviewed Karen's content. And according to internal correspondence included in the report, some of them were preparing to make a decision that could destroy her account's entire business model. A decision Karen clearly didn't know about yet, but she was about to. I have watched people lose lawsuits. I have watched people lose businesses. I have watched people lose fortunes. But there are moments when a person loses something they spent years building, and those moments are different because money can be replaced. Trust is much harder. The courtroom remained silent. Karen Blake sat motionless. Ethan Parker sat quietly. The spectators watched carefully, and I was reviewing correspondence that explained why Karen suddenly looked terrified. Years on the bench teach you that people often fear consequences they never expected. Karen expected criticism. She expected controversy. She expected headlines. What she did not expect was accountability. The advertising correspondence was remarkably clear. Several major sponsors had reviewed her content. Interesting, very interesting. Not merely the public videos, the private messages, the transcripts, the group discussions, everything. I reviewed the documents carefully, then another page, then another. And slowly the picture became obvious. The sponsors weren't concerned about controversy. Controversy generates attention. They were concerned about credibility. That distinction mattered a lot. One email immediately caught my attention. Interesting, very interesting. The email came from a national brand, a brand Karen had openly celebrated working with. The message stated, "Content integrity concerns require immediate review." The room became silent. I continued reading. Another sponsor wrote, "We are suspending discussions pending legal findings." Interesting. Very interesting. Then another, and another, and another. The pattern was unmistakable. The business relationships that helped fuel Karen's online success were already beginning to collapse before the hearing even ended. That observation fascinated me because Karen built her case around influence. Now influence was becoming a liability. Then I reviewed the final report. And honestly, the moment I saw it, I knew the hearing had reached its conclusion. The report came directly from the platform. Not speculation, not rumor, documentation. Interesting, very interesting. According to the report, Karen's account had already been flagged for coordinated harassment reviews. The room froze, domiciled silence, because suddenly the private group mattered even more. The review campaigns mattered more. The targeting mattered more. Everything mattered more. I looked toward Karen. She stared at the table, not speaking, not moving, not arguing. Years on the bench teach you that some people stop fighting when they realize the evidence is stronger than their narrative. Karen had reached that point. Then I turned my attention back to Ethan Parker, the bakery owner, the man who spent months watching strangers attack his business, the man who lost customers, employees, revenue, lease leap, peace of mind, all because millions of people believed accusations that the evidence failed to support. That observation mattered a lot. I reviewed the final records, inspection reports, financial statements, review timelines, video transcripts, private messages, the content calendar, the sponsorship proposals. Everything pointed in the same direction, not consumer advocacy, not public safety, engagement, growth monetization, and most importantly, intent. Years on the bench teach you that intent often reveals everything. Karen didn't simply make a mistake. The evidence suggested she continued a narrative long after serious doubts appeared. That distinction mattered enormously. I entered judgment in favor of Ethan Parker. The evidence overwhelmingly supported his position. The defamatory statements caused measurable harm. The coordinated activity amplified that harm. The damages were supported by the record. Simple. Direct, escorted by facts. The room remained silent. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Relief, not celebration. Relief, the kind that arrives when someone finally feels heard. Then I looked toward Karen. The woman who entered the courtroom surrounded by followers. The woman who believed attention was power. The woman who thought audience size could outweigh evidence. Interesting how quickly those things change, because now she sat alone, not physically. Emotionally, the supporters who arrived smiling no longer looked supportive. Many avoided eye contact. Others looked disappointed. A few simply stared at the floor. Years on the bench teach you something important. People will follow confidence for a while. Eventually, they follow truth. That distinction changes everything. Then something happened. A court clerk quietly approached counsel's table with a printed update that had arrived moments earlier. Interesting, very interesting. I reviewed it carefully. Then again, because the timing was extraordinary, the platform had completed its review, the account status changed, sponsorship tools disabled, monetizations suspended. Appeal pending. The room became silent, tumult silence. Karen looked up for the first time in quite a while, and honestly, I still remember that expression, not anger, not disbelief, shock. Pure shock, because throughout the entire controversy, Karen assumed one thing, that attention would protect her. Instead, attention exposed her. Years later, I still remember that case. Not because of the verdict, not because of the money, but because of the lesson. Social media can amplify almost anything, including mistakes, including falsehoods, including poor decisions. Karen believed followers were more important than facts. She said it herself. The evidence proved it. And eventually, she learned something every courtroom teaches. Facts do not care how many followers you have. Facts do not care how viral you are. Facts do not care how popular you seem. They simply wait piddly until someone puts them on the record. Karen brought her TikTok followers to court, believing they would witness her victory. Instead, they witnessed the collapse of the story she built her audience around. And by the time the hearing ended, the verdict wasn't the thing that damaged her account. The truth was, because followers can create influence, but only credibility can sustain it. And once credibility disappears, everything built on top of it becomes very difficult to keep standing.